Operation Let It Go, a tale of nepotism, engineering students, and revenge. Gather around, Reddit, because this is one of those stories that will make you laugh, cringe, and probably question everything you thought you knew about office politics, revenge, and the consequences of messing with the wrong people. My dad just told me this insane story about my late Uncle Dale. A man who wasn't just an engineer, but a problem solver, a prankster, and a man with a mission to make sure no one ever messed with his holiday party fund. So, for the holidays, here's a gift that keeps on giving, an unforgettable tale of nepotism, engineering students, and the most obnoxious revenge imaginable. Buckle up. It's a wild ride. The stage, Midwestern USA, a small engineering firm. Uncle Dale was a senior engineer at a small firm in the Midwest. A modest guy, but incredibly sharp. He was one of those people who could fix anything, whether it was a malfunctioning machine, a stubborn engine that refused to cooperate, or a colleague who had fallen on hard times. Dale wasn't just a colleague, he was a mentor, a guide, the kind of person everyone knew they could rely on. He had this quiet way of earning respect that was never loud, never boastful, but it was felt. He was the guy everyone trusted. So, when it came time for the office Christmas party, you better believe Uncle Dale was the guy everyone turned to for help. But let's be clear, he wasn't just coordinating a party. He was putting together a memorable event. He believed in bringing the team together with good food, a little too much wine, and bad jokes that somehow always landed. And to fund the festivities, he had this tin box sitting outside his office, inviting people to contribute to the party fund. It wasn't a big deal, just a simple gesture. But to everyone who worked there, it was a symbol of Uncle Dale's dedication and good nature. Everyone knew about it. Everyone was happy to donate. After all, it was for a good cause, the annual holiday gathering everyone looked forward to. The box had become a tradition of sorts, one that spoke to the spirit of the office. But here's the catch, this party fund wasn't just a money box. It was a symbol of the kind of guy Uncle Dale was. People respected him because they knew he always worked tirelessly for the team. There was no complaining, no cutting corners, he gave his best, and everyone followed suit. It's not like Uncle Dale was doing this all on his own, he was making sure everyone had a good time because everyone pitched in. Every year, there was always enough to make the party feel grand, to make everyone feel like they were part of something. The donations were small, but it was the spirit behind them that made it work. Some gave $5, others gave $10. It wasn't about how much, it was about community. And for the past few years, this system had worked perfectly. The office party became one of those unspoken traditions that everyone looked forward to, no matter what. That is, until the month before the big Christmas party. Uncle Dale decides to check the tin box, just a quick glance to see how things were going. Empty. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? Maybe it just wasn't as full as he remembered. But here's the thing, Uncle Dale had seen people putting money into that box. He had witnessed his colleagues, people he worked beside every day, slip cash into it, laughing and joking about what they were going to bring to the party. Everyone contributed, and this little box outside his office became a sign of goodwill. So, when he opened the tin box and found it completely empty, his stomach sank. There was a deep, uneasy feeling gnawing at him. He knew something wasn't right. And Uncle Dale wasn't the type of guy to just let things slide. He wasn't confrontational, but if there was one thing that would push him to his limits, it was betrayal in the workplace. Someone was stealing from the party fund, and that was a line no one crossed in Uncle Dale's book. The fact that it was the holiday fund, the one thing everyone chipped into to make the holiday special, made it even worse. It wasn't just about money, it was about trust. Someone had broken that trust. And Uncle Dale wasn't about to let it slide. Not now. Not ever. He decided right then and there that the culprit would face the consequences, but not in a way they would expect. Enter Brad. Ah yes, Brad. The owner's nephew. The guy who wasn't good at engineering, but was really good at acting like he knew everything. Brad wasn't like the others in the office. The other engineers and workers were there because they loved their craft, loved solving problems, and loved being part of something bigger than themselves. But Brad? He was there because his uncle was the boss. And he made it clear to everyone. Brad had this air about him, this smirk that suggested he didn't have to work for anything. He didn't have to prove himself. After all, he was the nephew. If he didn't do his job right, no one was going to fire him. If he did something wrong, the boss would overlook it. No one dared question him because, in his mind, he was untouchable. Brad didn't earn his place at the firm, he inherited it. And it showed. His work ethic was non-existent. His contributions were minimal at best, and his colleagues often had to pick up the slack for him. But no one said anything. Because Brad was the boss's nephew. Brad's arrogance was the stuff of office legends. He strutted around like he owned the place, always making snide comments about how things were always easier when you had connections, and it must be hard being just an engineer without the right family ties. His attitude rubbed everyone the wrong way. But what really got under everyone's skin was how oblivious he was to his own incompetence. He had no idea how to actually do the work his position required, but he was great at making it look like he did. He was the type of guy who would attend meetings and nod along, pretending he understood the jargon, but all he ever contributed were vague ideas that somehow always sounded wrong. But here's the thing about Brad, he thought he was untouchable. No one dared question him because, well, he had the power of his uncle behind him. So when Uncle Dale saw Brad coming around the corner that fateful day, there was something in his eyes, a spark of recognition. It wasn't just a passing glance, it was the kind of look that said, I know what you've been doing. The plan. Uncle Dale wasn't the type to charge into a confrontation. He wasn't interested in making a scene. But when he put the pieces together, his mind started racing. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle of the matter. Brad had stolen from the holiday fund, and, worse yet, he was acting like it didn't matter. So, Uncle Dale decided to do what any engineer would do. He started thinking, how can I catch this thief? He didn't want to just go to the boss and report Brad. He wanted something more. Something satisfying. Something that would not only teach Brad a lesson, but would make him the joke of the office. He wasn't just going to fire Brad. He was going to make Brad regret this, make sure everyone knew what kind of person he was, and do it in the most creative, brilliant way possible. And so, Uncle Dale did what any good engineer would do. He set a trap. He rigged a hidden camera near the donation box, knowing that whoever came by to steal would eventually return. And just in case Brad was feeling particularly sneaky, Uncle Dale made sure to have a colleague loudly boast about contributing $100 to the fund, giving Brad all the reason he needed to check on the box. And that's when the magic happened. A few days later, Uncle Dale got the notification that the camera was recording. He rushed to his phone to watch the footage, already knowing what he would find. And there it was, Brad, with that familiar smug look on his face, opening the box to find it empty. His expression immediately changed from indifference to outrage. He threw the empty box against the wall in frustration, his body language screaming guilt. That was the moment Uncle Dale knew it was time to put his plan into motion. Extra credit, engineering style. Uncle Dale didn't want to just report Brad. That was too simple. No, he needed something more memorable. So he went to his engineering students, the ones who were always coming up with the wildest, most creative solutions to problems, and he made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Extra credit for designing the most obnoxious, ridiculous rigged box that would make noise when opened. The only catch was that the sound had to be as grating as possible. The more obnoxious, the better. And the students? They went all out. A week later, they presented their creation, a tin box rigged with one of those greeting card inserts that plays music when you open it. But this wasn't just any song, it was the song that had taken over the world in the worst way possible, Let It Go from Frozen. The one everyone loved at first, but quickly came to despise. The one that would be the perfect soundtrack to Brad's downfall. And that wasn't even the worst part. The students had made sure the box couldn't be closed unless you found a hidden button on the side. If you didn't know about the button, the song would keep playing and playing and playing. But that's not all. They had used industrial-strength glue to secure the insert in place, making sure the song would blast out at full volume for as long as the box stayed open. They had thought of everything. They even angled the insert in such a way that the volume would be deafening, making sure that anyone within a 5-foot radius would hear the entire melody in all its infamous glory. Uncle Dale had to stifle his laughter as he watched his students present their masterpiece. They had poured their creativity and ingenuity into this prank, and it showed. It was an engineering marvel, a perfect storm of mischief and payback. Uncle Dale smiled to himself, knowing he was about to get his revenge. And it was going to be glorious. Now all he had to do was wait for the right moment to set the trap into motion. The moment of truth. The next morning, Uncle Dale walked into the office, making a grand show of announcing that someone had donated $50 to the party fund. He purposely said it loudly enough for Brad to hear. He knew the nephew would take the bait. Everyone around the office was just as curious as Uncle Dale was to see what would happen when Brad encountered the rigged box. So, with an exaggerated flourish, Uncle Dale placed the box on the counter near the door, where anyone passing by could see it. He then retreated to his office, trying to suppress a grin. It wasn't long before Brad walked by, his eyes immediately locking onto the tin box. He must have heard the subtle mention of the donation, because he was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Uncle Dale watched through the hidden camera feed, his heart racing with anticipation. He saw Brad smirk as he walked toward the box. And then, without hesitation, Brad bent down to open it. The moment the box popped open, the dreaded melody of Let It Go blasted through the air. The entire office heard it. Brad froze, eyes wide, looking around in disbelief. It was like time stood still for a second as everyone in the office realized what had just happened. Brad slowly turned the box around, trying to figure out how to close it. But no matter how hard he tried, the box remained open, and the song continued to play. The high-pitched notes of Idina Menzel's voice blared out, filling the space, and it was only getting louder. Brad's frustration was palpable as he slammed the box shut. It didn't budge. He tried again, nothing. He shook the box, desperate to silence the music. But that only made it worse. The song was unstoppable. By this point, everyone in the office had gathered around to witness the spectacle. People were snickering, whispering, pointing. Uncle Dale was practically beside himself, trying not to burst into laughter. But the best part was yet to come. Brad's face went from shock to absolute rage. His cheeks turned red, his hands clenched into fists, and he let out a series of grunts as he tried desperately to get the box to shut. But it wouldn't close. The song wouldn't stop. It was like the box had a mind of its own, taunting him with every note. People had started to gather in the hallway, peeking around the corner to see what was going on. And all they could hear was Let It Go at full blast. Brad's uncle, the boss, came strolling down the hallway, curious to see what all the noise was about. When he rounded the corner and saw his nephew struggling with the box, the full extent of Brad's incompetence and frustration was laid bare. Brad was visibly sweating at this point, completely panicking as he tried to figure out how to silence the box. But the more he fumbled, the louder the music blared, and the more people gathered to watch. Uncle Dale's satisfaction was practically radiating from him as he watched this play out. The boss stood there for a moment, watching his nephew's complete meltdown. He could see the sheer embarrassment on Brad's face as he realized that the entire office had turned their attention to him, and all they could hear was the increasingly ridiculous soundtrack of a song that had become a meme in itself. Everyone was watching, and Brad couldn't escape the awkwardness. He let out a frustrated yell and, in a fit of rage, chucked the box against the wall. The box hit the wall with a loud thud, the song stopping only when it landed on the floor. The fallout. At this point, the office was dead silent. The last note of Let It Go hung in the air, and for a brief moment, there was nothing but the sound of Brad's ragged breathing. Then, the boss stepped forward. He looked down at the dent in the wall, then turned to Brad. Without saying a word, the boss simply walked into his office, gesturing for Brad to follow. The office erupted into whispers as Brad trudged behind his uncle, his shoulders slumped, and his face a mixture of guilt and rage. 15 minutes later, Brad emerged from the boss's office, a cardboard box full of his things in his hands. He didn't look up at anyone as he walked past his coworkers. His head was down, and the color had drained from his face. A few minutes later, everyone was buzzing with the news: Brad had been fired. The boss had walked into his office, and without a word, handed Brad a letter of termination, his job security gone in an instant. The boss had even made a note on Brad's file: do not rehire. Do not recommend. The nepotism that had protected Brad for years was suddenly irrelevant. His career was over, and the let it go box was the final nail in the coffin. As Brad left the building, a few of his colleagues couldn't help but chuckle. There was a sense of vindication in the air. Brad's arrogant, entitled attitude had finally caught up with him, and he'd paid the price in front of the entire office. It was sweet, poetic justice, served on a silver platter with a side of Disney-induced frustration. The Christmas party. At the company Christmas party, Uncle Dale had one final surprise for the entire office. As everyone gathered around the big screen to watch the year's highlights, Uncle Dale stood up and queued up a video. The footage was from the doorbell camera near the party fund box. It showed Brad's pathetic attempt to steal from the box, followed by the sound of "Let It Go" blaring through the office as the thief's identity was exposed. The office erupted in laughter as they watched Brad struggle, his futile attempts to close the box becoming the highlight of the year. And in that moment, Uncle Dale leaned back in his chair, savoring the satisfaction. The prank had worked perfectly. Brad was gone, his reputation in tatters, and the office had a new legend to tell. But the best part? The holiday party was a massive success, funded by the collective goodwill of everyone in the office, except Brad, of course. Moral of the story? Never underestimate the ingenuity of an engineer with a vendetta. And if you're going to steal from a holiday fund, be prepared to face the music. Literally. R.I.P. Uncle Dale. You were a genius, and your legacy will live on in every tale of clever revenge we share. Your masterpiece, Let It Go, will haunt us all for years to come.